Recording in progress.
Good evening, everybody. Am I on? Yeah, okay. Welcome to the October 13th regular meeting. I'll call this meeting to order. At this time, we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do I hear adoption of the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved in second. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? None, passes unanimously. On to our first presentation. Phil, would you like to take the honors?
Mayor, Council, it's my pleasure tonight to introduce you to our new Human Resources Director, Shannon Moore. What's that?
Raise your mic up a little bit, yeah.
It doesn't come. Okay, is that better?
Yeah.
All right. So for the past couple of years, Lee Alland, our former HR director, was always, hinting at retiring and always told me that when I get around to retiring, we need to hire Shannon. And so I am pleased to tell you that we managed to pull that off. We're happy to have her here. She's hit the ground running. She has a lot of experience in human resources. And so that's enough for me. I'll let Shannon come up and introduce herself. And I told her you will grill her. So please don't let me down.
Yeah, I might have to lower it. I'm not as tall as you. Maybe you don't want it. Hi. Shannon Moore. It's really nice to be able to meet all of you. I've been here, what now? Officially a month or so. So it's been really nice to be able to meet everyone. As you mentioned, I came from North Shore Fire Department. I was there about 9 years. And then before that, worked at Seattle Children's Hospital. So that's kind of a large bulk of it and lots of different parts of HR. And I know I have big shoes to fill with Lee.
Does council have any question or grilling you'd like to do?
Yeah, what grilling?
Nope. Wow.
What are your thoughts on Lake Forest Park compared to the two other places you've worked on HR? What are your thoughts and observations?
Yeah, I think it's a really good culture. You can tell coming in. I've got healthy leadership, which I think makes a big difference. So I feel a little bit of, I guess, blessed, if you will, for lack of a better word, because the other places I've been at, when I've come in, the position actually was always new. And so I had to develop and create the position as I went through and develop a lot of the processes. And here, Lee's already built a pretty good foundation. So it's nice to be able to come in with some of that already foundational work there.
Well, thank you and welcome.
Thank you.
Yes. Councilmember Cassover.
Yeah, thank you and welcome, Shannon. We're very, very pleased to have you here. This is not an easy time to be in HR in a small city in particular, or a medium-sized city, we like to call ourselves. It's a very difficult environment to be competitive for good employees. And I wonder what your thoughts are about how we as a city can be as creative as possible in recruiting and finding the kinds of employees that we want to bring here and keep here.
Yeah, and I've been really kind of pushed into that recruitment cycle here as we've had a lot of these positions coming up that are hard to fill. So it's been really nice for me to work with each of the managers and hear what their needs are. I think balancing that with the job market is always challenging when right now I think it is more of a job seeker market. Ultimately, if you have a good culture that can, I think, speak for itself, that's going to go a long way if your employees feel like they are valued. So I think a lot of it's going to be that internal work as well, but being creative in how we approach our recruitment processes. It's something right now that I've been coming in to try to figure out how we've done it, but then also not create too many waves on ideas on maybe how we can go about things a little bit differently, because to your point, there there are a lot of challenges, especially when you're trying to compete with larger markets.
And if I could just follow up with that, what can we on City Council do to help?
Well, that's a great question. I don't have exacts right now, but I think being able to develop a partnership with all of you would be helpful, understanding the goal and vision in which you would like things to move forward, talking about compensation philosophies, those type of things, so that I can support that, and being able to collaborate with each of you would be helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Welcome. I've been in your office once. I know that we have a goal of having our office painted. Sorry, I know the right people to talk to right here. You know? So
I know, so you'll put a picture up, you'll start
Yeah.
decorating for me.
you know, if you guys
Yeah.
don't know, I actually threaten that if they don't put some decorations up, I hang a picture of my own face up there, and they seem to get decorations pretty quick after that. So with that, have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
I'm sure they'll all be in to see you, and thank you for everything you do. And yeah, it's going to be great working with you, and you do have your work cut out, but we'll do our best to make it easier on you. Okay.
Appreciate it. Thank you
Thank
for your
you.
time.
Thank you very much. Welcome. Okay, with that, we have a couple of proclamations. I've asked Councilmember Cassover to read the Breast Cancer Awareness Month proclamation.
I'd be happy to, Mr. Mayor. And if I might just ask our city clerk, I'm not sure if my microphone is on. It just
Yeah, you
it's
just-
on and it's not turning off.
No, yeah, it's always on. Don't push the button.
Okay, all right.
Just talk.
I will. Whereas while considerable progress has been made in the fight against breast cancer, it remains the most commonly diagnosed cancer and the second leading cause of death among women in the United States. And whereas every 2 minutes, a woman is diagnosed with breast cancer, and 30% of new women's cancers diagnoses will be for breast cancer. And whereas 1 out of every 8 women in the United States will be diagnosed with breast cancer during her lifetime. And whereas in 2022, an estimated 287,850 new cases of invasive breast cancer are expected to be diagnosed in women in the US, and 51,400 new cases of non-invasive in situ breast cancer. And whereas men can also get breast cancer, and an estimated 2,710 men will be diagnosed with it in 2022. And whereas there are more than 3.8 million breast cancer survivors in the United States, including women still being treated and those who have completed treatment. And whereas as we display pink ribbons, wear pink clothing, and our police department wears pink patches and badges to raise awareness, we also support those in our community that are courageously fighting breast cancer and honor the lives lost to the disease. And whereas this October, we recognize breast cancer survivors, those battling the disease, their families and friends who are a tireless source of love and encouragement, and applaud the efforts of our medical professionals and researchers working to find a cure for this deadly disease. And whereas Breast Cancer Awareness Month is an opportunity to unite all citizens in our community to prevent breast cancer deaths through increased education, early detection, prevention, and regular screening. Now, therefore, the Mayor and Council of the City of Lake Forest Park do hereby proclaim the month of October 2022 as Breast Cancer Awareness Month in the City of Lake Forest Park. And the Mayor commends this observance to all citizens and encourages all women and men to learn more about this disease. Signed the 13th day of October 2022, Jeff Johnson, Mayor.
Thank you. I will be reading the domestic violence. Whereas October is recognized as National Domestic Violence Awareness Month that first began in 1981 by the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence as a day of unity to connect battered women's advocates across the country. And whereas domestic violence is a pattern of physical, emotional, verbal, and/or sexual abuse, which includes but is not limited to threats, intimidation, isolation, and/or financial control. Whereas domestic violence is an intentional pattern of behavior that is used by one person to harm and take power and control over another person in the context of a date, family, roommate, or caretaker relationship. And whereas domestic violence is an epidemic affecting individuals in every community, regardless of age, economic status, sexual orientation, gender, race, religion, or nationality. And whereas 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men in the United States are victim of domestic violence, and a woman is killed by a spouse, ex-spouse, or dating partner every 74 hours in America. And whereas 1 in 15 children are exposed to domestic violence each year, and 90% of these children are eyewitness to this violence. And whereas the city of Lake Forest Park remains committed to the professional response to the incidents of domestic violence in our region, now therefore the mayor and the city council of the city of Lake Forest Park do hereby proclaim the month of October 2022 Domestic Violence Awareness Month in the city of Lake Forest Park, and call upon all community members to speak out against domestic violence and support local efforts to assist victims of these crimes and finding the help and healing they need. Signed this 13th day of October 22. Jeff Johnson. These are almost pretty much the stats that's always been on this paper I read, and unfortunately, I think they probably are a little higher after COVID. So thank you, Chief, and all your people and all the people that work with people that go through this, and all the people that have gone through cancer and suffering cancer. Our thoughts are with all of you. So thank you. Okay, with that, we're going to move on to public hearing. Public hearing on ordinance 1250, adoption of 2018 internal building code, other construction related codes, and the international fire code with amendments. Calvin, why don't you, I guess, stumble on up here, and we could move that thing to you. We could have moved the podium to you.
Come on now. That's it.
Yeah.
Hi, how are you guys?
Fine, Calvin, welcome. Sorry to see you on crutches.
So I guess the first way to start this out was, according to what I have here, is the questions on my presentation. Last time, I know a few of you weren't here. So on the update I did last time.
I think he's talking to you, not me. I don't do it.
No.
I'm following the list I've got from Jeff.
I don't have a clue what we're talking about.
Okay. You weren't here, Mayor. I did a presentation on the codes.
So we were supposed to have the presentation again.
No, it was questions on the
Okay.
presentation that I've already done.
Do we
Okay.
have questions? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
I'm very sorry too. I thought we were waiting for something. to show up. Okay, well,
Okay.
now that we got that, do we have any questions on his last presentation? None at all? Okay, I guess they have no.
Okay. Then from here, I move into the fee schedules.
Okay.
So I've got some
No.
paperwork.
Wait,
Oh,
Councilmember
sorry.
Lebo.
point of order. I thought we were having a public hearing.
That is down a little further after
Yeah.
he talks.
The fee discussion will be after they adopt and we adopt. the
Yeah,
building
so you're not,
codes. After we adopt the building codes, then we'll talk about the fees.
Yeah.
So you should do the
Okay.
public hearing on adoption of the fee code. For the
so
building code.
So if there are no
questions from the
questions.
council, then we'll open the public hearing.
Could
Go ahead.
I,
Yes, Councilmember.
I was just going to suggest, Calvin, that it might be good to just mention where LFP was making any changes from the standard International Building Code and International Fire Code. Are there 1 or 2 areas where we're making changes or additions, or are there none? I think that's a good way to kind of preface this. Is it just adoption of something that is the standard? Or have we made any changes in it?
Yeah, the building code stuff I went through last time I was here on the IRC, IFC, all that.
Yes.
there really aren't any difficult changes in there. Now, the fire code that we submitted was from Jeff LaFlamme, who has since retired. And those things there really aren't that difficult to explain. You know, one of them is speaker or monitor coverage, how to measure a radius, which is different in the fire code than what we have in our ordinance. But that being said, I'll leave that one alone. So it's really just, the fire code itself is just kind of tweaked. Really, there's nothing real difficult.
So you're saying everything, that all the changes are relatively minor or
They are,
clarifications?
yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, Councilmember Lebo.
So I'm not sure where to bring this up, but the changes in the building permit fees are not part of.
Yes, I understand. That's after. we get
No,
through this.
but my point is, they're not part of the ordinance request here. There's no motion in the ordinance to implement new building permit fees.
Yes.
No, yes, what?
Well, there's no, Phil, go ahead.
So I can cover that. So I think there's confusion in the way the agenda was put together, so that all that council is taking action tonight, the way this is set up is there's presentation on the building code and the fire code, questions from the council, and then public testimony, and then you would take action on adopting the building code and fire code only. And then following that, item C is merely a discussion on the building fees, and Jeff and Calvin are back with additional information based on the last discussion. There's expected to be no action on the fees. That is just merely a discussion item that was listed up higher, just to keep everything together and have
Okay.
one robust discussion. And then those fees will be rolled into the resolution that you pass in November, setting the fee schedule.
Okay, thank you.
Kind of thought what was going on, but I didn't know how to explain that. So, so
You're fine.
sorry about that. Okay, with that, I have no other council questions. Oh,
Councilmember Riddle.
Councilmember Riddle, you need one of those oven mitts, like with the hamburger helper mitt. That'd help me out a little bit.
I'll find me one of those, Mayor. I think for clarification, the only code that we are asking to adopt tonight that isn't just that has any changes is the fire code. All the other codes are simply adopting the latest version that has been adopted by the state. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so that would be the building code, the plumbing code, all those. Just what the state adopting, we're going to adopt the same thing, and the fire code has those minor changes.
Yes.
Thank you for that clarification.
Anybody else? Yes, Councilmember Cassover.
Thank you. So Calvin, I have taken a look at the code a little bit. Those of us who are not building professionals have a little difficulty understanding most of it. But one of the things that did catch my eye, and I did want to ask a little bit more about, was the turning radius for the fire trucks. And knowing Lake Forest Park streets and the tight corners that we often have, and some of the cul-de-sacs that are pretty narrow, are we okay there? Does the
Yes.
fire department have any issues with us? Is our
No.
ordinance sufficient
No.
for real safety for our community?
Yeah, your turning radius, typically they call it 20 from the inside. In the fire code, it's 20 from the inside and 45 to the outside. The fire marshal, again, Jeff LaFlamme, came up with 20 and 40. Now, him and I had to lay out a radius that we had a problem with some years ago, and with the homeowner, and it also was gated, and we had to measure, make it work, and that's to get that rig around. And please understand, these rigs change in size. They're 35 feet. They're ear to ear. We call them 11 feet wide. That's from mirror to mirror, about 10'6". So from everything I've seen here in LFP, we're okay. We've only had one problem with one radius, and that was the one that was down here on a private drive in town. So
And that's been solved.
I'm sorry.
And that has been solved. That one?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
All right. Thank you. And does the change that we have in our fire department and therefore the fire marshal, I guess we have a new one now because we're with Shoreline and I
Right.
mean, are we in contact with them?
A
Is that-
lot.
Yes. Okay, so
Yeah, the
everything's
assistant
okay.
fire marshal and the fire marshal come in and I talk to them quite a bit. They still come in. Now they're from Shoreline. They're doing all the fire reviews and single family homes and all that. So yeah, we talk quite a bit.
Okay, so we're all good.
Yes.
Nothing to worry about. All right.
Yes.
I appreciate that. Thank you very
Yes.
much.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, so at this time, we'll open the public hearing. Everybody has 3 minutes. Do we have anybody signed up, Chief? Okay. Matt, do we have anybody online?
If you want to address the council during the public hearing, please use the raise hands function. Doesn't look like so, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, there we have no questions. Then I'll close the public hearing at this time. Staff, do you have any questions? You didn't get any questions to answer to, so I think we'll move on from that.
Can I say
So,
one thing, Mayor?
Yes.
I have been questioned by a few of the council members on whether we have a fire sprinkler ordinance here because they want to read into the code saying, well, up to 5,000 square feet, you have to sprinkle. And that's true. Our ordinance, what we have here is based off of fire flow at the nearest hydrant, which is a minimum of 1,500 GPM. Now, that being said, when you run the formulas on the homes, if your house is 9,000 square feet, you're going to sprinkle no matter what. We have very poor water flow in certain parts of town that we don't even come up anywhere near 1,500 GPM. So most of the single family homes that I've been reviewing over the past 18 years have had to be sprinkled just for that reason and access. But just to clarify, we do not have a sprinkler ordinance that's specific to Kenmore, Redmond, or Olympia and all that. But given what we have here for fire flow, you pretty much have to sprinkle. And when you run the formulas on a single family home, let's say it's about 4,000 square feet, people think, well, 1,500 GPM would get me by. No, we look at length to the nearest hydrant. We look at length of the road. There's a full formula there on the square footage of the house. And typically, if you're going to have a house that's about 2,000 square feet, you're going to have to sprinkle. You're going to be about, I'm sorry, not 2,000, about 2,500 square feet. You're not going to make 1,500 GPM. You're going to need to run about 1,700 GPM. So most of the homes here get sprinkled no matter what, just based off of size. So,
That's new homes, right?
I'm sorry?
That's new builds, not, that's newly built homes, not current houses.
All new single family homes, yes, and multifamily. R2s automatically have to be sprinkled anyways. Those are live work units like we have up at Pulte.
unless of course you live on Circle Drive where they don't have water pressure at all. Just joking. Sorry. Okay. With that, ordinance 1250, adoption of 2018 International Building Code, other construction related codes, and the International Fire Code with amendments. Would anybody like to move ordinance 1250?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's moved in second. Any discussion? Yes, Councilmember Lebo.
Yes, I'm in favor of adopting the codes. There's just, and maybe it was a miscommunication. So when the code takes effect, I was intending in previous discussions that there would be a transition period or a grace period, so that in the first 6 months of when the new codes are adopted, you could also use the old code. And the way it got written,
Our city attorney. would
I
like
don't
to
mean to
answer.
interrupt you.
go ahead.
I believe that I did draft it as you intended just because right now applicants are submitting under the 2015 and the 2018 code because it's a stricter or equivalent code. And so for the next 6 months, that will continue. Applicants will be able to do the 2015 and the 2018 code. And then at the end of those 6 months, when this is effective, they'll only be able to submit under the 2018 code. I think that was your intent.
That was my intent, but that's not the way I read it because this ordinance replaces the 2015 code.
So it's effective in 6 months though. So for the next 6 months, they can use the 2015 and the 2018 because they are currently submitting under the 2018 because it's a stricter equivalent code. And so we have both going on right now. And for the next 6 months, that can continue.
Right, but you have to make a judgment call about whether or not you can apply under the 2018 because it's not always automatic.
I would like.
So I was just proposing that the language read that it's clear that you could submit either one in the next 6 months and that after 6 months, it's only the 2018.
To council.
Most of the submittals that I have coming in right now, even though they can see in our ordinance that we're under the 15 code, 98% of them are all under the 18 code. No one's been questioned that yet. So if they want to come in at the 15 or the 18 for however long we decide, I'm fine with that.
I would just propose to make it clear that over the next 6 months, you can use either one. Because typically you do have to get the approval of the official to demonstrate that it's equivalent or greater strictness.
Okay. Yes, Councilmember Bodie.
What I believe the drafting has done, Councilmember Lebo, is to say that this ordinance goes into effect in 6 months. And in the meantime, you could submit either under 15 or 18 or both as well. And everyone seems to be submitting under 18. So it's the outcome is I think what you wanted. The mechanism is somewhat different based on our city attorney's advice. Do I have that correct?
I just wrote it differently. Yes, but I
Yes.
think we do have the same outcome. I understand.
Yes.
Would like it clearer.
I would propose to make it clearer, having had this issue come up before, and maybe it's not such an issue in Lake Forest Park.
Okay.
So I'm just proposing that over the next 6 months, you can submit on either code and it's not up to a decision by the building department.
Okay. So on that, do we want to move this forward or how would you like to do this, or have her rewrite it right now, or just because we seem to all, do you think it says one thing? Most people think it says the other, whatever. What we're really trying to do is make sure nothing happens for
Councilmember
6
Riddle.
months. Yes, Councilmember Riddle.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm curious how we've been accepting 2018 when it technically isn't in our code. Is that something that we should perhaps look at a later date and make it clear that that's the minimum requirements for submittal? I'm just curious how you address that, Calvin.
I've never had a problem. There's nothing to really address there. If they want to submit on the 18, I don't question that. If I was to have an architect say to me, hey, can I submit under the 15 codes versus the 18, or use the 18 back in 15 when it's coming in? You can also go the other way because the requirements are a little less in a certain type of occupancy or something. We've done that too. So it's, yeah, I'm not the one. What is in our ordinance, if they want to submit in the 18, I'm not going to call them out and go, oh, you need to submit under the 15, obviously. You know.
Yeah, I think it would be useful for us maybe at a later date to clarify that, just, so in the future, I think, and I'd also like to hear Councilmember Lebo's maybe suggested language for the effective date and see if that's worth making a small amendment to this before we vote.
Okay, I'm gonna call on Kim in 1 second, but let me get Larry in case he has something to add. Councilmember Goldman.
Thank you. Just a question. Is there any way in which the 2018 code is more lenient than the 2015?
Not that I know of.
Because it seems to me this is a bit of a moot point then, because for the next 6 months, people could choose to go with the 2015, or they could voluntarily go for the more strict 2018, but there would be no confusion because for the next 6 months, it would be entirely voluntary on their part. And so I'm
Yeah.
fine with the code as written.
Correct.
Okay, Kim.
I'm sorry, I was just going to reiterate that same point, that in
Okay.
2018, it says in the 2015 code that stricter or similar codes can be used, or, methods can be used. And so that's why Calvin is allowed to allow the 2018 code. It is in the 2015 provisions.
Councilmember Cassover.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to agree with my colleague, Councilmember Goldman. We're in a situation here where architects and their clients can voluntarily decide that they want to abide by the 2018 codes because it matters to them that their building is to a higher standard. And I don't see that the way that this is written in any way causes confusion. I think that it's quite clear that this ordinance goes into effect in 6 months. And at that point, everything in this ordinance must be adhered to. But that those who wish to voluntarily use a stricter set of codes before then can do so. I have no problem with the way this is written now. And if an amendment is made, I would vote against it.
Okay, Councilmember Lebo.
So the reason I propose this is I have had experience working with city agencies with regard to transition of codes as to which code could be used. Sometimes new codes are in fact less stringent. And that is a result of changes in the understanding of particular aspects of the code. And so I was just proposing that rather than leave it up to the discretion of the building official, we just clearly state, for example, I would propose in section 6 existing, in section 5, delete 6 months, and then just add a new section 6 saying existing 2015 LFP building code. The existing LFP building code remains in effect for 6 months after the passage and publication of this ordinance. So it clearly states that the applicant may use either code and is not then subject to the discretion of the building official, which is an approach that is typically used to make that clear. Because I have been involved where we wanted to use a new code and the building official said no. Now, in this case, Calvin is a very reasonable person and may say, well, I'm fine with that. I was just proposing that we offer clarity that for 6 months, either code could be used.
And let me just give you a little example here. I think Councilmember Goldman asked me if there was some leniency in there. One of them is the square footage of a B occupancy, which is an office space, which I think I brought it up last time. The occupant load is 100, was into the 15 code, 100 square feet per occupant. The 18 code is now 150. If I had an architect call me up and say, I've got an office space of this, I would like to use the 18 code and go with 150 square foot occupant load. Sure, why not? Am I going to hold them tight to the 100 square feet of the 15 code? Not when we're that close, no. And I've worked with many jurisdictions that work exactly like that. Many. So, yeah, I understand where council members coming from. another jurisdiction I worked at, we did work with the public. We did work with major architectural firms, and sometimes the newer code was less stringent, and we went ahead and brought it in. I don't recall in 34 years of doing this of ever telling anyone, no, you're gonna get shut down if you try and come in and use the lesser of the two. I've never seen that. So that one's, you'll have to forgive me. I've just never seen it. Not with all the building officials I know and I work with. So.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to call the question.
Okay. Question's been called. I guess all those in favor of ordinance 1250, adoption of the 2018 International Building Code, other construction related codes, and the International Fire Code with amendments non-changed to the original form it was presented. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any nays? John, I didn't hear you. Were you a yes or no?
Aye.
Okay. Passes unanimously. Thank you, council. With that, we will go to the discussion regarding the updates to the building permit fees.
Matt, you,
Oh, am I supposed to show something? Hold on.
we're pulling up the our schedules that we came up with. I want to give council the exact way of how we came to the numbers we did. We had to completely break everything down hour by hour. So let me give council each one of these. Sorry, Matt, I didn't have this ready for you sooner.
That's the rest down.
Thanks.
A lot of questions at the first meeting I had on the fee schedules and how we would get to where we're going with this whole thing. And the big surprise was that if you go to the second page, there you go. You'll look at the current cost per square foot, which is $116.70. Okay, our proposed is $150.87. That's a $34.17 difference, which is about a 29% jump. And then below that, you'll see utility garage occupancy, which is $44.28 going to $60.43. At the bottom of that page, those are the comparables of all the jurisdictions of what they have currently that is in their current fee schedule for Mercer Island, Bellevue, blah, blah, blah. So us being down at 116 is real low. Now, when you pan out the numbers, and you have to forgive my lingo here, the amount of time that I spend, that our entire staff spends on, if you go back to the first page, take a look to the right, and you'll see standard. We're talking about a standard R3 occupancy, single family home. You look at the administrative time. That's the time that the people from the counter to everybody from the front staff, everybody that has anything to do with that set of drawings before it's even brought in as an application that we spend meeting with contractors, pre-development meetings, phone calls, everything else that happens. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? That's before application. Below that is the review time. That takes into consideration the fire department. Typically, we're going to go 2 hours or 2.5, whatever. Me, Public Works, which I work for Jeff, and planning. Okay, and you look at 12 hours, and that's not unheard of. That's pretty much the gimme number there for 4 different people to review those plans. Okay, and just below that is the inspection time of 40 hours. That's a brand new single family home. Typically, I'm running anywhere from 20 to 25 inspections on a new single family home. That's about the going rate. I've had, I think I talked to Phil about this, since Department of Ecology got involved, I've added 5 more to the list. Just because they want a pre-development meeting, I have to have a silt fencing inspection. I have to monitor that job, that new single family home that's under construction typically for a year, at least 3 or 4 times. And then I have to do a final inspection and send a final slip in showing that I did my job for Department of Ecology. So there's 5 that's been added to the list over the last 10 years. And if you look at the hours, we've taken the cost of me and my permit tech. This is what we came up with. Now, that standard number up top of $5,623.20, that's an actual submitted single family home of what I took in and what we took in total review and permit fees. So are we matching up to 6,000? No. When you go to the left and you go to custom homes, and you can see the time that's involved, the inspection time has gone up to 50, and we've gone from 92 hours to 108 hours. These custom homes we have in town, they're either pin piled in, they have moment frames, grade beams. There's a lot of stuff there that's not going to be involved in a spec or a single family. I'm sorry, just your standard single family home, which is selling about 1.8 mil right now in LFP. So, you know, that's our actual cost right here. You go back up to the top. That's what the permit fee was. So we're short. Okay. And those hours, Public Works Director and I and Phil have all gone through those hours down to a T. We've made sure we didn't leave anyone out. I mean, whether it's Lindsay's staff that has to touch the paperwork upstairs, you know, or Jessica out front that has to let them in and take their check. So we've addressed everybody that touches. And right now I'm focusing on the single family homes, because if I go down the road on additions, it's real complex. Every addition's unique. Everything's unique anyways. And at the bottom of it, you can see the percentile that we came up with of increased, of what was increased, how much that has to go. Now, I have to say this. One thing that the builders like about us is that they don't have to wait 6 months to a year to get a house permit. They like it here because they want to build it here. They're going to get a good bang for the buck. And they're going to get a single family home or even a custom in and out the door in 2 months, maximum. And I think that's pretty good compared to some of the other surrounding areas around us. So, okay. Questions on that table? Please,
Councilmember
go
Bodie.
ahead. Don't, Tracy, or,
No, Councilmember Bodie.
oh, I'm sorry.
Calvin, thank you very much. I just want to start out by explaining that when we met in one of our working sessions, the council was concerned that our fees, our permit fees, were not covering our costs. And so you have done exactly what we asked, which is to true up what we think it actually costs and make sure that our fees are covering our costs, which is what the citizens of our community deserve, right?
Correct.
So, and then I also appreciate the comparative cities because it shows that we're in the ballpark with the comparative cities. I like the fact that you've broken out the custom and the standard homes. I think that's really smart, given the nature of the work. So I'm strongly in support of this, and think that this is the way to go. I only want to add what we talked about at our working session, which is we should refresh these numbers more frequently, every 2 years.
Every 2
Okay,
years.
every 2 years. I
Yes.
wasn't sure if we had agreed on 2 or 3.
No,
So-
Phil's given me the speech on that one already. It will be
So
done.
because we want to continue to
Yes.
recover our actual costs on an ongoing basis. So I just want to say thank you. This is very clear and exactly, I think, what I was hoping for anyway. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Councilmember Farah.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Inspector Kilman, for the great report. I want to concur with my colleague about how complete this is. I just want to make one clarification. But when you calculated the building fees, single-family residence, those were just adjusting the hours you and your staff actually spent on it. You didn't adjust the hourly rate at which you were, calculating that final total cost.
Say that again.
So in other words, you have total hours, for instance, for the custom home at 108, and the total cost is $7,624.
Mhm.
Clearly, you applied some formula to convert those hours into a money figure. And I'm just wondering.
Well, what we used was the I think it was the 116 rate, which was under the standard rate here. And then at the 150, 38 is where we want to be, is where the 6302 and the 7, well, I can't use custom, but that's where that came in at on the total cost on 6,300. Is that right, Jeff?
Yeah, the hours that we have there are based on the rates for the building official and the permit coordinator at their full salary.
Okay, that's excellent. All right, so I think this doubles down on Councilmember Bodie's comment that we really do need to review this every couple of years, because obviously that rate is also going to go up, right? So yeah, in addition to, King County or the state putting on more hours that we need to work, your rate is going to go up. So having a more frequent review, I believe, will keep our what we charge in line with what our costs are. So thanks.
Deputy Mayor French.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Calvin, Jeff, thank you for this. This is exactly what the council is asking for. And it really is, it really helps us understand better what is. There's a buzz out here in the room. Am I missing something? It's okay. Was there something else, Jeff?
Well, I had the plumbing and mechanical. I could go through those too if you wanted.
Oh, yeah. Just let me finish my comment if I could. Yeah.
Okay.
And this is very helpful, and it does illustrate the point that Councilmember Lebo was making. And I thank my colleague for pushing this point as well as Councilmember Bodie previously, that we do need to revisit these things on a regular basis. It's not just this department, it's other fee schedules as well that we need to take a look at, so that we can make sure that we can serve the community very well, but also that we're making sure we get the best value for our citizens here for City Hall. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I talked to my buddy who's the building services manager over in Redmond. He's got a staff of about 35 people.
Wow.
And he's going through this study right now that they had to hire out. Talk about spending, checking 20 inspectors for their time and all that. And they found out the same thing, that there's some short stuff here. That's why Councilman Lebo came up and said, well, we need to kind of look at this. I really appreciate that now, because there are some definite holes in here that I didn't see. And now I do. So we're going to fix it, hopefully with your help.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, you want to move on then?
Pardon me?
Go to the next one?
Oh, yeah, go to, mechanical is one of the, I think the next page, I think the last page is plumbing. And you can see our current rate or current fee of, and that one I'm gonna really have to explain to you. Our current fee is an admin fee of $85. That takes care of, for years, that's been in there. And that takes care of our permit technician's time to input that permit into the system, archive it, do everything. However, when you add, let's say, a furnace of $25 to that, you come up to about $10. Well, our actual cost for the city is $150 an hour. So we're not doing good in these one-shot inspections. You know, I do fine in single family homes. We just break even, but the fees have got to be adjusted. In that, when you look at what we're proposing and the proposed fee of $150, that includes one inspection. And really, who's gonna moan and groan about $150 permit fee? Not many people. Considered most, and that pays that we broke down, and that pays for our time. That pays for our permit tech, and I put down an hour and a half of my time because I also have to take the inspection off the recorder, put it in our software, take it out, drive out in the field, use a city vehicle to do it, come back, put it back into the system, pull the file, send it over to my permit tech, archive it, and that doesn't include Lindsay's people that take care of the checks upstairs. So anyways, and you'll see to the right of the proposed fee, when we're saying $150, that means you can get one inspection and say a sink thrown in there with it. That's a one-shot deal. You go out, we're covering costs for the city at that price. Now, where I get a lot of the folks that pull permits here typically run a new sink, a new water closet, new shower, maybe a couple of drains. So you're ended up with 4 or 5 of these different, what we call units in the code. And those are okay because they're a one-shot deal. I can look at the whole thing. Boom, I do my one inspection and I'm pretty much done unless I got to do a final on it. So anyhow, that's that. Does that make sense? Hopefully, but I appreciate that you guys brought this to my attention. I wasn't happy about it when I saw it. So, but that's why we will be changing the codes. I'm sorry, the fee schedules every 2 years. So,
Thank you. Do I have any questions about this section? Councilmember Lebo?
Thank you. I very much appreciate this, and I like how you've shown this. Just for my clarity, when I look at where it says the estimated actual costs, so help me understand. So for example, if you go across the mechanical permit base fee, the proposed is $150, and you get to the far right, and the estimated actual is $149. Now, as you go down though, how should you read that? Because if I'll just, the furnace, so that's on top of your base mechanical fee code or permit. So that would mean that if you're installing a furnace, does that mean it's $180 total?
Yeah.
Okay. So then if you go across where you get to the far right, it says the total cost is $149. That's not really the actual cost, is it?
no, I think what you're looking at, the estimated actual cost, from what I recall, that was the cost of my permit tech and I to do our job. Isn't that what the estimated cost that we came up? That's what that is.
So if I'm an applicant, when I come in, I pay under the proposed scheme, the proposed fee for a base mechanical permit would be $150. but because I have a furnace, I add on an additional $30?
No, if you just have that one unit, a furnace, you get the furnace and inspection, and we'll do that in one shot for 150. Now, if you're gonna add more units to that, then yes, you need to add to that. That was the part we needed to
So,
clarify. a little bit.
so here, that, so, so just for discussion purposes, so I have a base permit fee of $150. Now, the furnace is one unit. I don't have to pay $30 more.
Correct. You
But
have-
if I have a gas hot water install, I pay $30
You add
more.
$30 to that, correct?
Okay, but then when I go all the way across in the schedule, it says $149.
That's not really part of the schedule. That just shows what each of those individually would cost for us to do one inspection with a permit. We broke down the time for each of those different inspections that would take.
But how much is the applicant paying?
The applicant is going to pay $150, and that includes
The
permit
base,
Plus whatever.
plus one
One.
inspection.
okay,
One of these fixtures. And then any additional would be the $30 fee.
but he's paying, but this applicant is paying. So in this case, for 150, they get the base plus the furnace as an example.
Correct.
They've got a gas water heater, they pay another $30.
Yes.
But it costs you $150?
If you had to do those in two separate trips
One
with one, right? If you had two separate permits, two separate inspections, technically it would cost 150 each time. However, typically these are done concurrently, or at least, they can be done effectively with other inspections that are being done. So that 150 covers us on our worst case scenario of having to do one inspection on one fixture.
That's where we're losing most of it. Where we're not doing well at is the one-shot deal, the homeowner that calls in and says, I just would like a mechanical permit, hot water tank inspection. I go out, I do it, I come back, $120. No, it's really costing us $150.
Okay, so the concept here is that the 150 covers the trip out and all these others are essentially incidental to that inspection.
Correct.
But there is some paperwork involved and that's why you might have a $30 fee associated with those other units.
Exactly.
It's not as though that is costing $150 each time.
No,
It's
no,
just an
absolutely.
incidental to the 150.
Correct.
Okay, so my confusion was looking at the,
This column.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's
it's
just-
not
Don't look at that
Yeah,
column.
ignore that. That's a single incident, single item, actual cost.
Right.
Okay.
And if we get to the plumbing, it's going to be a very similar nature. Again, we've tried to simplify things, making it basically one unit price for.
So as we go forward for the public, if you just had, for example, an example down here on the fee schedule, then it might be clearer as to
Absolutely.
what you got. So it's not,
Right. And again, this is basically for our information discussion, is to have the difference in both dollars and percent as well as.
I was just trying to understand that, you are covering your costs, but it's
Yes.
not, okay.
And again, the plumbing is set up the same way, where we have the base fee of $150 covers the permit as well as the one inspection. And then each additional additional fixture is $30. Again, for simplicity and clarity.
Closer to the mic when you talk, buddy.
There you go.
Any questions that is the plumbing up there right now? Are you gonna put the plumbing up or is it?
I couldn't figure that either.
Any other questions? I think we're all gonna go out of the room, come back in and then start over because we're like, the smoke, I think, is getting to all of our brains, or at least the mayor must have gone into too much smoke today because it's pretty interesting. So are we okay with the fee schedules that he has presented to us at this time? Okay. Calvin, I understood it because it's like when you call me and you want a timing belt and I say you should probably do the water pump, you say no, and then you call me back and want the water pump. You're gonna have to pay that labor twice then. So you probably better listen to the person who's giving you the advice. So thank you. Thanks for all the work you guys did. I think
I think you did a great job. I think I'm going to thank Council Lebo because he really is the one that started us down the path. I thank Phil every day. I don't need to thank him in public. But no, Councilmember Lebo kind of did get our brains going this. He showed us a way. So thank you. And I think that's a good idea when you actually, we put it out, maybe say, okay, if you call me up and you want this, 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 and this, it's going to cost you this much. But if you call me and make me come back every other day for a month, it's going to cost you a lot more. So, okay, thank you, sir. Take care of yourself, okay?
Thank you.
Okay. With that, everybody, we're going to go on to citizens' comments. And do we have anybody signed up, Chief? I haven't seen you walk up here in 3 years. Well, thank you, sir. Okay, at this time, I'd like to call Mary Heck to the podium. Just state your name and remember you have 3 minutes and thank you.
I'm here today because Sound Trans's plan for my driveway, it wouldn't be there. Or my front door access. And I have a letter from Sound Transit stating that they're going to condemn part or all of our property if we don't agree to what they want. They haven't even stated what they want. So we don't know what's happening at all. And I got a map here that shows that they're going to put a green strip and a sidewalk right in front of where we park our cars. And won't even be able to get in our house. And I don't know if you can see this from here, but this is a picture of my driveway where I park. The main driveway right here is where they want to put the green strip and the sidewalk, and we won't be able to park at all or get in our house. They're gonna leave us with this little driveway, this little down driveway right here that's so steep, we aren't really exactly able to use it. And after Sound Transit does their work, there won't even be any parking up here on the side of the highway. This will be gone. This parking up here will be gone. My driveway will be gone. Our house will be unlivable. So we don't know what to do at this point. And so we're really worried. We just had our house painted in July. So it's got a brand new paint job. So to make this house unlivable at this point would be extremely sad and detrimental to us as a family. And we've been residents of Lake Forest Park. I've been there for 45 years, my entire life. My mother's been there for almost 50 years. And I would just hate to see us pushed out of our city by Sound Transit. And I brought all these materials for the city to have. And I hope that we can work something out so we can continue to live in our home. I guess that's it. Sorry, I'm not a very good public speaker. I'm quite nervous. Excuse my anxiety.
You did
Thank you
very
very much
well.
for hearing me, and I'd like to give this materials to the city.
Okay, we'll have Phil grab them for you and thank you very much. And we
Thank you for
understand
hearing.
and thank you. Good. Okay, at this time, I have nobody else signed up. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak?
We do have Mr. Sneddon.
I know, I
signed
was
up.
talking to the audience out here.
Oh, sorry.
Nobody else signed up on this piece of paper, so that's who I'm talking to. So anybody else want there? There's none. Okay, now we'll go to the interweb or whatever they call it.
First, we have Mr. Sneddon.
Welcome, Mr. Sneddon.
Hello, can you hear me?
Sir,
Hi, I'm Jeff Snedden. I live at 15415 Beach Drive, Northeast, and I'm here to discuss a recent study regarding a planned 11-unit complex at 3803 Northeast 155th. At issue here is Blachetta Creek, and if it should have a 115-foot buffer or a 50-foot buffer. I'm assuming the council knows about Blachetta Creek and where it is, and if you don't, you should go there and look at it and the canyon that's on either side of it. For the 30 homeowners and businesses who sit directly on top of the canyon or at the foot of the creek, this is an incredibly important issue, as it is for all the homes and businesses and neighborhoods that'll be impacted by Sound Transit's upcoming construction on Highway 522. This is two major nearly simultaneous construction projects that threaten the creek and the stability of the ravine. I want to read comments from three different studies. The first from the developer. The stream, they didn't put the name in, maybe they didn't know the name of the stream, is mapped as a type N stream on the Washington Department of Natural Resources Forest Practices Application Review System. Type N streams do not provide fish habitat and would likely be considered a perennial non-fish stream. The City of Lake Forest Park says type NP streams require a 50-foot buffer. Sound Transit reports this. The Washington State Department of Fish and Wildlife considers Blachetta Creek to be fish-bearing. WashDOT and WDF and Sound Transit are in discussions to make Blachetta Creek fish passable, as doing so benefits steelhead, sea run cutthroat, and cutthroat trout. Lake Forest Park does not classify Blachetta Creek and does not assign a standard buffer width to it. Blachetta Creek is classified by WAC and the Department of Natural Resources as a type F water and type N stream, associating it with a 115-foot standard buffer. This is what WashDOT reports. Since 2013, WashDOT has worked to comply with the requirements of a U.S. District Court injunction to correct stream barriers on or near state highways. Blachetta Creek was not on the original list of protected streams in 2013, but it was added on September 15th, 2020. In addition, WashDOT informed me that this creek, Blachetta Creek, is within the usual and accustomed area of the Muckleshoot tribe, and we are in discussions with them about this creek and these problems. The council cannot let the tail wag the dog here. To allow not one, but two major nearly simultaneous construction projects over an area clearly identified as a steep slope and landslide hazards over a creek the city has not definitively classified is simply not acceptable. Blachetta Creek and Ravine clearly deserve the protection of a 115-foot buffer. And this must be resolved prior to issuing a DNS or a CSDP for the work planned at 3803 Northeast 155th, an approval that is likely weeks away. Having in the city council just wave your hands and say it's out of our control is unacceptable. Too much is at stake here. It is you, the council, our elected officials' job to resolve this and to do it now and apply the 115-foot buffer. Thank you.
Thank you. It looks like we have Julian Anderson. Yep. Go ahead, Julian.
Now you can hear me.
There we go.
Good evening. I'm Julian Anderson. I live in Lake Forest Park. Blachetta Creek. Sound Transit and Washington DOT pay attention to this creek, recognize its historical presence and its current potential fish passage. City of Lake Forest Park appears to have little knowledge or care of this creek. Sound Transit reports that LFP has not classified the creek. Thus, Sound Transit could infer that as a practical matter in Lake Forest Park, there is no stream buffer. I've emailed some documents to you to go with this statement. I just want to point out a few details about them. This is all from Appendix D of the Ecosystem Resources Technical Report, March 2021 SEPA Environmental Checklist by Sound Transit. And page 49 there, and I provide you a copy of that. This color-coded aerial map provides a good overview of the creek corridor and the highway corridor. Note the extent west of 522 and the forested area further to the west in which the creek waters originate. Note also the green gully east of the highway in which Blachetta Creek descends to Lake Washington. Page 69 is a sheet showing wetland and stream impacts, another annotated aerial map. It highlights the long, deep culvert under the highway and the waters of the creek below the outfall of that culvert. The dense forest canopy in the steep-sided ravine dominate the map. Note also the unidentified L-shaped building at the bottom of the image, close to the gully. This is IEH Laboratories, a testing company for food and environmental regulations and other purposes. IEH is an unsung, but I think important, Lake Forest Park located enterprise. The soil of the steep-sided ravine is unstable, as recent and historical mass wasting events testify. Any disturbance to the gully will increase the risk, certainly increase the anxiety of all in the vicinity, including downhill neighbors where slide debris might come to rest or silt-laden waters might make their deposits. And on page 40, the whole page really is devoted to commentary on Bechetla Creek. One quote, while fish have been documented in the lower reach of the stream, none have been documented in the upstream near the highway. Nonetheless, WDFW, Fish and Wildlife, considers the stream to be fish bearing. Another quote from that page, the assessment by Fish and Wildlife also determined that the creek has fish use potential and that improved access would make available approximately 738 feet of upstream habitat that could benefit steelhead, sea-run cutthroat, and resident cutthroat trout. And in the third paragraph on that page, quote, Lake Forest Park does not classify Bechetla Creek and as such does not assign a standard buffer width to it. Bechetla Creek is classified as type F water and type N stream by WAC and DNR respectively, associating it with a 115-foot standard buffer width. From the creek's point of view, widening State Route 522 right-of-way to the east without substantial improvements to the creek's environment is unwise. Compared to the slight improvement in travel time from Seattle for a greatly diminished ridership, the benefit of this segment of continuous northbound bus lane in the Stride 3 project does not justify even this one significant environmental risk. Does this council agree? Thank you.
Thank you, Julian. Anybody else, Matt?
If there's anybody else in the audience that wants to address the council, please use the raise hand function.
Okay. Nope. Okay, seeing none, we'll close citizens' comment at this time. And we will move on to consent calendar, I believe.
So moved.
Second.
Consent calendar been moved in second. Any other discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any nays or abstain? Nope. Thank you. Passes unanimously. On to ordinance and resolution. This is for council discussion. Resolution 1858, interlocal agreement regarding the design of improvements for the 25th Avenue Northeast Ballinger Creek Habitat Restoration and Flood Reduction Project. Yes, welcome. You're quick.
Thank you. This is our second touch at this interlocal agreement that we are looking. Yeah, there we go. This is the second touch for our ILA agreement with the city of Shoreline to reach out to WashDOT to set up an account with them to do the review for the design, which would help with the culvert that we have under 195th, just north of State Route 104. Again, they're going to be responsible for the design of it. We're just taking part of the review with WashDOT. So that's what this ILA is for. And I believe the first time that I was here, there weren't any questions. I'll certainly take any at this point.
Questions? Anybody have any questions on this? Okay. Seeing none, do we bring this back up a little later on? I don't see that. When did you want to move this?
If we could move it tonight with your approval, I would certainly appreciate that. And
Council, would you agree to do that? Go ahead.
I'm willing to move this tonight. I've read the materials pretty carefully and it all seems in order to me. Anybody care to second that?
Second. Moved.
Is this in a point of order? Is this an amendment of our three-touch rule first, and then we'll vote on the ordinance?
Yeah, I
So
think
I
so.
interpret your motion as
Well,
amending our
yes,
three-touch rule.
it really wasn't a motion. It was really an indication that I'm willing to
Oh.
do it.
Oh,
And
oh.
if I had concurrence on the council, then we would move ahead. Sorry. Okay.
Sorry, I interpreted it as the waiving of the three-touch
Oh,
rule.
okay.
I have a point of order.
Okay.
On the agenda, there are two different resolution 1858s.
I
one
was just
about
gonna
this,
bring that up too.
And so which is the real 1858?
Real 1858, please stand up.
The real 1858 is standing before you. When Chief Harden gets up, his will be 1859. We're going to bring that up later.
Okay, so we've got that
All
clarified
right.
now.
So I just need some guidance then from somebody. Should we move this ordinance later in the agenda, or is it proper to move it now?
Right now.
Okay, in that case, then I would move that we suspend the three-touch rule for this item.
Okay, I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved in second to remove the three-touch item from ordinance 1858. Is there any discussion on this? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of removing the three-touch ordinance, please say three-touch move, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, any nays? Pass unanimously. Okay, on from there.
Okay, so then I would like to move. What's it called?
1858.
Ordinance 1858, approving interlocal agreement with Shoreline for this project.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved in second. Any discussion? Nothing, no yellow hand, seeing none. Okay, all those in favor of ordinance 1858, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Okay, pass unanimously. Thank you, council. Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate that. Okay, now we're up to ordinance 1251, amending section 10.06.010 of the Lake Forest Park Municipal Code regarding authorization to traffic safety cameras in school walk areas and in public park speed zone. Deputy French, we'll let you take this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, colleagues. You have before you tonight ordinance 1251, which amends the section of code that applies to traffic safety cameras. And it makes the addition of the state statute allowed additional zones for cameras for traffic safety that went into effect, I believe, July 1st. And this is a preliminary step should we choose to, in the future, after further study and review and part of a safety plan, to consider putting traffic safety cameras either in a school walk zone or in a park zone. We did not, state statute, as you may recall, also allows it to be put in a hospital zone. We do not have a hospital currently, and we can certainly pivot if we ever have a hospital and have that need brought into the mix. I thought it was important to keep this as simple as possible. And again, it's just the basic addition of these specific sections. If you take a look here, going down to on page 63 of your packet, item 3, speed zone violations on any roadway identified in a school walk area as defined, which is very specific in the RCW. And 4, speed zone violations in public park speed zones as is defined in RCW 4663-170 B, parens B, parens II. So again, this is not giving any authorization to put additional cameras. It just allows modifies the code so that should it be suggested through safety studies and examination of our roadways that additional cameras might need to be placed, that we would have that have the law in place. With that, I'd be happy to field any questions. And again, this is the first step of a very long multi-step process, as we've talked about over a number of meetings. Colleagues, any questions about this one?
Yes, Councilmember for Tommy, and then
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Deputy Mayor French, for introducing this. And I've gotten comments that fall roughly into 2 categories about this particular ordinance. One of them is, isn't this, does this mean that speed cameras are going to start appearing everywhere in the city instantly? And then secondly, isn't this an invasion of privacy? Isn't there like some concern about people's individual privacy? And I was wondering if you could address both of those.
You bet. I'd be happy to. Thank you, Councilmember, for the question. The intent of this, first of all, it would be the application of additional cameras would be applied very judiciously. The chief has present chief and former chief has referred to traffic safety cameras as force multipliers. We have limited resources to have people out in the streets. You probably may recall, but I will make mention of it anyway, that under state statute, these cameras cannot take pictures of people's faces, pictures of the license plate, the vehicle. And I think that is a very important thing that's in the mix. The other thing that I was remiss in not mentioning too is that one additional component of this is before it states that before adding additional cameras or relocating any existing camera to a new location, an analysis of the locations where automatic traffic safety cameras are proposed must be presented to the city council. So I use the example of one point of 197th Street, where we've had very serious issues with speeding. And despite the fact that there are radar warning signs, people continue to speed on that road. Because there's a direct entrance to one of our parks, there's an opportunity potentially for additional speed enforcement camera for that location. These additional cameras, I would remind everyone, have again, the state has responded, the legislature responded to requests by various communities because of the fact that there's been a dramatic increase in accidents, speeding. The data, for example, relative to the number of fatalities on our roads in Washington is for this year is staggering. We're going to grossly exceed any previous years this year. And I think we've actually already done that in terms of fatalities statewide, which is a very sad statistic. The simple fact is, and taking this one more step further, I received an email, as you all did probably, about the question about whether this is simply a way to generate more revenue. And that couldn't be farther from the truth. We've all stated this before. I've stated it repeatedly in each of our conversations. That is my fervent hope that these cameras generate zero revenue, because that means people are obeying the law and they are being mindful of their neighbors. And if they're from outside our community, being respectful of the character of our community and being safe on our roads. Hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Mr. Goldman had a question.
Yes, I guess it's Councilmember Riddle, then Councilmember Goldman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple questions. One about the school walk. It does mention in our packet that there would be that elementary schools should identify the walk routes within the walk area and that the superintendent would have some role in that. Has there been any discussion yet with our Shoreline School District superintendent about their thought about this and their interest in providing those walk zones? And
no, and I think you may be conflating something here. So which section were you looking at?
It's our cover sheet on the background.
In the background, I'll make sure that there's not a mistake in here.
The hazardous conditions must be documented by a process established in rule by the superintendent of public instruction. And so I don't know if that's
so it's not
the state
important.
Superintendent public instruction.
Let's get our nomenclature correct here, terms of art, if you will. There's a difference between a school walk zone and a school walk route. So a school walk route is actually a designated route that is defined. There's actually maps that are required under state statute that show the directions to it. A walk zone is an area within the within a 1 mile walking route that is considered not hazardous to the children, as opposed to a specific designated walk route.
Okay.
So walk zone, walk route. I know that's difficult, and I in previous conversations, I think I got some things confused there as well.
Thank you.
So, and I think it was you that corrected me about it was not a 1 mile radius. It was a 1 mile meandering distance, if you will.
And perhaps I think Councilmember Goldman might have been, but I can't remember. But about the park speed zones, those are not reduced speed zones like we would see currently around our schools. That would just be the same speed that we would have the road at, and it would just be a speed camera that would note people who exceed that speed. Right? There's no reduction required in that zone.
That's an excellent question. If you may recall, in the NACTO city limits, the guides in setting speed limits suggests that the characteristics of the area are taken in consideration. So I can't say one way or the other whether there would be a reduction in speed specifically in certain areas. I think there's a possibility that, for example, Animal Acres or something, there might be a reduction in that area, but it would really be dependent upon what the kind of holistic look at the characteristics of the roadway and what the matrix defines as the outcome for how the speed should be set.
So the speed limit is a separate discussion than the speed camera. The speed camera would just tag people over whatever we determine is the appropriate speed for that road.
I think that's a fair assumption. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Member Goldman.
Yes, thank you. So my understanding is that the state legislature authorized 2 categories of speed cameras. The first is what we're talking about now, cameras that are near parks, hospitals, and school walk areas. The second is more of a general class that's based on the population of the city. And so does this ordinance touch that second category, or is it solely on the first category?
Thank you. That's an excellent question. And your description was spot on, Councilmember Goldman. There are 2 classifications. One is the hospital school walk zone and the park zone cameras. And then the other ones are, I guess we call them, I've used various terms, but sort of the at-large cameras that are allowed based, as you indicated, by population. And that's an excellent question because we have not, I'd have to defer to our legal counsel on that, whether that particular application would be part of this. The only thing I would have to say is there are very stringent requirements for the placement of those cameras. You have to, again, you have to consider equity analysis, or it has to be in a race zone that's been designated a no race zone, pardon me, as Shoreline has done in a number of streets, including 15th, just outside of our city. And there was a third one. As part of the at-large cameras can be placed as part of an overall traffic safety plan that is filed with the state.
So when I was reviewing it, it looked to me like we could just go under the base provisions of adding for parks and the school walk areas, and we were not using the cameras based on population. We were not using those provisions of the RCW.
Thank you.
I suppose if I could ask a follow-up then, if this ordinance is designed to kind of set the groundwork to allow us the option in the future if we so choose, would it be prudent for us to also lay the groundwork for the at-large cameras, or do we automatically have that ability?
I think we could always go back and do that analysis. Are we authorized under statute to use these cameras too? I have not done that analysis. I could certainly do that if council wished to do that.
That's an excellent question, council member. Because of the nature of the additional steps you have to take to place those particular cameras, I had thought of treating those separately, but there certainly could be merit to, I think there is merit to potentially setting, laying the groundwork for that. Currently, we could do that, meaning we'd have to table this and revisit it at a future time after the legal team has had the chance to take a look at it.
Okay, Councilmember Bodie.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you for answering all these questions. It is kind of complicated procedurally and based on the new statute. Based on the brief conversation we had and our city attorney's views, I would want to leave this restricted to the school walk zones and the park areas at this point. I think the other provisions are so complicated, and I also think we should proceed with caution on the topic of new traffic cameras. So I'm on a go slow, and we can always pick that up later should we choose. But I think we have our hands full with these two categories, actually.
Thank you. Any other council members? Yes, Councilmember Lebo.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, for proceeding with this as a proposed ordinance. I would like to suggest that under section B, where the safety cameras are proposed, must be presented to the city council for approval, as opposed to just presented.
Oh,
I would
yes.
prefer the clarity.
That is a very reasonable amendment to make. Yeah, I would certainly consider that as a important inclusion there to make it clear. Colleagues, does that sit?
Yes.
Okay. Presented to the city council for approval.
Yes.
And Mr. Mayor, may I respond to Councilmember Bodie?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Thank you. The more I think about this, I think, Councilmember Bodie, you're absolutely correct. It is a very complicated series of new state statutes. And we could come back and revisit it. And I completely agree wholeheartedly that proceeding with caution, I do not believe in more than one or two additional cameras around the community in problem zones if the data supports their inclusion. And the intent of this, again, is just to have one more tool in the toolbox. So if at what point we feel that it's necessary, or the members of the community lobby for something, or the PD observes specific kinds of behaviors that are challenging to address in other ways, then we have that tool in the toolbox to work with.
Councilmember Cassover.
Thank you very much. And I concur with my colleagues in thanking Deputy Mayor French for all of the work he's put into this. It's very important for our community, I believe. And talking about the community, I'm wondering, and I don't know whether our city attorneys had a chance to really look at this, but is a public hearing required for this type of action on the part of council at all?
I did not see that a public hearing was required, no.
Okay, thank you. It just occurred to me that this is the sort of topic that I think maybe a town hall or some sort of public meeting might be very useful in both bringing forward the feelings of the community so that we as a council are really clear in the decisions we're making. But also, if we do go ahead and make some decisions to place these cameras in school and park zones, a town hall like that would be very useful in actually publicizing the presence of these and alerting our community to be watchful for them, but also helping alert everybody just to slow down. So I would be very much in favor of us doing some really good public outreach on this topic, and would work with you to figure out what the best way is to do that.
Thank you, Councilmember. I completely agree. That's a great approach.
Great. Thank you. So any other questions on ordinance 1251? Can we move on to ordinance 1252? Is that your next one?
Yes, we are. I guess we don't have, let's see, we don't have this listed for action, do we? We have
No,
had
this is
3
your-
touches now. So let's see. Yes. Ordinance 1252. Let me scroll down here. My apologies. 1252. Adopting the National Association of City Transportation Officials 2020 city limits, setting speed limits on urban streets. I think all of us have had a chance to really dig through this document. Even since we started, colleagues, it's been really fascinating to hear out there amongst our other municipal leaders and councils that this is becoming something that everyone is taking a very hard look at, and recognizing that unique circumstances require getting away from a specific, the old school way of setting speeds of just to move traffic basically, rather than for public safety. So this is an ordinance that is required under state statute for us to adopt a methodology before we are allowed to set speed limits without doing a full engineering study, and that is on local roads. I will remind everyone that it's not on arterials and not on state highways, which we have 2 arterials and we have 2 state routes within the community. And again, this is just laying the framework for us to do a safe speed evaluation study and collect the data, and then we can determine what is an appropriate level to set speed limits on neighborhood streets, and then moving from there to arterials if there are any changes necessary there, and then hopefully working with the state to make some changes in terms of the state routes, particularly for consistency on the 522 corridor, as well as consistency on the 104 corridor within our own community. And with that,
You want to move these tonight, if you can, if you want to.
colleagues, would you, I would be amenable to moving these tonight if you, why don't I answer questions for this first, and then we'll come back to that.
Questions on 1252? Yes, Councilmember. I'll go with Goldman first, then Fairtarmy.
Yep, thank you for bringing this. I'm very supportive of NACDO. I have a question about section 2 in the safe speed study. And I was hoping you could clarify a bit what sort of study this would be, and just in general, why we would be looking to do a study of all the minor streets as opposed to just kind of taking the flow chart approach that is present in the NACDO document directly.
Well, so the neighborhood streets, we have to gather data. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to gather data for any place where we would consider changing something or upholding what the speed limit is. The data is necessary to go through the process to actually populate the matrix and take a look at what the intended or recommended outcome would be in terms of setting it. So it doesn't necessarily mean that has to be specifically a consultant, for example. It could be an intern that could be gathering some of the data so that we have something to actually input into the decision-making matrix. Excuse me, I keep trying to say matrices, but it's just one. But then, as we've talked about before, if there's any changes that are going to be recommended, or if we're going to consider changes on arterials, another classification of roads, or state highways, we will have to do additional engineering types of work, but this will be the foundation for whatever consultant would bring into the mix for the highways and for the arterials in setting the stage.
Okay, and may I ask a follow-up, please?
Yes, please.
And so just to confirm, the sort of data that we would be collecting, this would not necessarily be measuring median or percentile speeds of cars. It would be more about classifying the roads based on what density and how much conflict there is with pedestrians.
Thank you. That's a great point. And it's, again, in one of our conversations, Councilmember Goldman, we were talking about this earlier, that it is taking a look at some of the more qualitative things rather than the quantitative, the specific hard numbers that you would be required to do on other kinds of other situations. Now, as we all know, and it's you two PhDs on the dais, more data is always better as long as it's good data. But at the same time, the intent of the state legislature in giving the local jurisdictions the authority to set speed limits without doing engineering studies to try to keep it as simple and as as least onerous as possible so that there's not a radical expense to make these changes, which could be very expensive if we were required to do holistic studies and get data points from locations throughout the entire community, even though our communities is, as we like to say, medium-sized. We're aspiring to be medium-sized. Does that help?
Yes, thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Councilmember Firatami, then Councilmember Brittle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Deputy Mayor, for again bringing this topic up. As speaking as one of the PhDs, not all data is quantitative, so I appreciate the emphasis on qualitative data on this. Again, the comment from the community seems to fall into roughly two categories, one of which is, does this mean that tomorrow I'm going to have to suddenly start driving 20 on everything? I can't drive 20. And the second comment, again, is more philosophical, which is Seattle has adopted the Vision Zero strategy and their number of fatalities has gone up. And so I'm wondering how you'd address these 2 points.
Those are excellent questions. I've received the same questions. Let me start with your latter question first. My response to that is just imagine how much worse it would be if they hadn't adopted Vision Zero and put into effect the various programs that they have put into effect. I believe that what we're all seeing and what Seattle is quantifying is that people are driving because they're very stressors in their lives and they're driving in an unsafe manner more readily. It was one of the officers in the PD said, it's really difficult once you take the leash off to put the leash back on. And I think that that's really an appropriate analogy. And I think that there's some members of the greater region that just have not recognized that we all share a common responsibility to take care of each other and make sure that we're not doing something that is endangering someone's life. So the first question is, the way I address that is, the process is going to take some time to get sorted out. There will be some streets that are not going to be suitable for certain kinds of changes. And regrettably, I think that there are actually some neighborhoods that would benefit from potentially, a 15-mile-an-hour speed limit, but we're not allowed to do that other than in a recommended capacity. Some of the really narrow, non-compliant alleyways, basically. Think of the goat trail, for example, is a very, very dangerous road, even at 10 miles an hour, because it's blind corners. But there will be a process, and I think that as we go through, it's not going to happen overnight. And the way I'm hoping that we can enact, once the data is gathered, that we can enact changes to the neighborhood streets will be one on a phased approach, because we don't have the resources to do it whole scale. I understand from Director Perigo that we have roughly 150 speed signs that are over 20 miles an hour in our community. Some of these would have to be repurposed on state routes or someplace else potentially. And I think the other thing that's really important for us to highlight too is because of the 54 annexations that we had back in the 90s, we still have some archaic relics of the unincorporated King County areas. And so we have some streets that are 30 miles an hour, some that are 25. We have some that are split between that. And so I'm very thankful that an outcome and a benefit of doing this kind of analysis and this kind of program is that we're going to have consistency to help set expectations throughout the community. And I would note too that the mayor and Councilmember Vice Chair Cassover and I wrote a letter to the city of Shoreline last fall, encouraging them to lower their speed limit they were considering lowering their speed limit on 15th to 30, but then they decided they were going to back away from that. And we urged them to do it because of setting the tone going down into Lake Forest Park. I've been driving that street almost every day the last couple of weeks, and I've noticed a considerable change in people's behavior, even during rush hour. So I haven't seen any additional enforcement. Just by lowering the speed limit, I think they're setting expectations for drivers, and I think it does make a difference. There's always going to be outliers that are going to exceed the speed limits, and that is where we're going to have to rely on our PD.
We don't have a PD, Tom. We don't have enough people to do that. I'm sorry, I gotta say this. Did you guys all figure out that this all started happening when we quit having police? You know, you guys talk about Seattle. I own 2 shops in Seattle. I drive in Seattle every day. I haven't seen somebody pulled over in Seattle in 3 years. There's a reason, because we don't have enough officers, but I don't care what study you do. I don't care what speed limit you have, but if they're not gonna enforce the law, you call them outliers. I call them bad people. We need to start doing something about that. So this, I'm sorry, but I'm tired of the studies. I'm tired of this and that, when we've got to start taking care of the people. And if you want to protect the people of Lake Forest Park, figure out how we're going to have more officers so we can pull people over.
Couldn't agree with you more, Mayor. And so just to be clear, we would need another ordinance in order to lower the speed limits to 20 miles an hour. This does not.
That's
do it.
correct.
Okay.
That's correct. That's not the intent of this right now. This is just adopting the methodology that's required for us to enter into that process.
Councilmember Riddle's been waiting patiently, and then Councilmember Cassover.
Mayor,
And then
I'll go
Councilmember
after.
Bodie.
I'm blocking the view here.
So my question or comment is about section 2 as well, which is the safe speed study. Knowing that we're going through our budget deliberations right now, and this suggests adding a contract for work, or at least it suggests proposing a contract for work. Have we had any discussion about how that will fit into the budget? Is that something that we are capable of doing?
Excellent question. Thank you for that, Samra. The recommendation had come down from the administration, potentially be using this street, I'm forgetting the fund.
Safe speed study? Oh, the
Capital? No.
Well, in the mayor's proposed budget, there was $200,000 that was put in there, and I can't, as you can't remember the title of what that was.
I can't remember the fund.
Street improvements, thank you.
Street improvement. Thank you.
That wasn't tied to anything. That was just a suggestion of how you could spend that,
It's
where we
just-
could put $200,000, because we had heard the concern from council of addressing future street needs.
Thank you for that. And I didn't mean to imply that that was something hard and fast that the administration was proposing. It's just one method of funding some of this. And again, as we've had 4 discussions in the past about this, the council, my read of you colleagues has been that we want to reserve our resources really for the arterial and the highway type of work in terms of consultant time, because that is absolutely statute required. And if to a lesser degree for these other items, and I've heard that loud and clear. I want to make sure that it is a very how to describe it. There are so many steps to so many of these different things that it's hard to keep track of them all. And so again, these 2 ordinances are foundational, and then building on that going forward.
Councilmember Cassover, then Councilmember Bodie.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And again, I'm thinking about how we keep our community really clearly informed about these ideas that are contained in this document. And I find the document very compelling. The sort of the speed kills kind of message is real. And one of the pieces of data that we're getting out of Seattle right now is that a lot of those fatalities are in fact pedestrians and cyclists, not so much cars crashing into each other as cars not paying attention to pedestrians and cyclists. It's a very serious issue, and it's not one that we have experienced in Lake Forest Park for a number of years, but God willing, we won't. But my concern is that we get this document far more visible to the public, and I'm not sure that we've done that yet. And I would very much encourage our administration to actually promote a link to this document because I do believe it's quite accessible to the general public. It's not highly technical in much of its parts. And particularly the introduction and the first couple of chapters are really very accessible to the general public. So I am in support of us adopting this as a guiding set of principles for how we approach traffic safety in our city. But I really want to make sure that the community is really well aware of what it is we're looking at.
Thank you, Councilmember Bodie.
Thank you very much. I agree with Councilmember Cassover that I support this as a framework and a methodology for us to use going forward. But I also think that community engagement is important because people are going to jump to the conclusion on both the traffic cameras and on this, that there are preordained decisions. And I think we need to hear from the community and, as I said, proceed with caution. In thinking about this, and in driving, since I've returned, I am not so much in support of a more uniform 20-mile-per-hour speed limit. So I just wanted to say that. So in terms of priorities, looking forward, I actually think a 25-mile-per-hour speed limit is actually pretty slow and helpful. So I would prioritize looking at areas where we have 30-mile-per-hour areas and looking at 25 miles per hour. So just wanted to put that context out there because I think we're going to start getting questions from people if we have community engagement. And where do we stand on the traffic cameras? Where do we stand on the speed limits? And so I realize that's a change from what I might have said before on reflection. And I also think that Bothell Way is such a high priority. It is routinely 50 miles an hour. And I think that, so those would be, that is a different matter. I completely get and needs more funding and engineering studies. But I would put my priorities there on the 30-mile, looking at the 30-mile-per-hour zones and whether they warrant being down zoned to 25 and making sure that we have the resources to do a good job on Bothell Way. So I'll just end my comments there. Just wanted to give a little bit of advance notice of my latest thinking on this.
Thank you, Councilmember. We've pretty much heard from everybody except Councilmember Lebo. Would you like to say anything? Okay, and then Councilmember Riddle, you still have your hand up? Okay, thank you. Okay, Council, we've been talking about this a while. Which way you want to go with this?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion to waive the 3-touch rule on, I believe, Ordinance 1251. That's the first of the two.
I actually thought you guys have touched it 3 times. Is that what you said, Tom?
In which case, I'd like to place that motion with a motion to approve Ordinance 1251 to amend Section 10.06.010 of the Lake Forest Park Municipal Code regarding authorization for traffic safety cameras in school with areas and in public park speed zones.
Mr. Furtani, would you consider it acceptable to amend it to say the section that Mr. Lebo was looking for to say approved by subject to council approval in
Yes, those are friendly amendments.
as
So as amended.
amended? Second.
Moving second, any other discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those.
Mr. Mayor,
Sorry.
could I just emphasize Councilmember Cassover's point that we should do a good job communicating on this and what the point is, and that we haven't made any decisions. We're just implementing the requirements of state law or the opportunities under state law as subject to further conversation with the community. So I think that communication piece is important.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, all those in favor of ordinance 1251 with friendly amendments added, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Okay, that passes unanimously. Thank you, council. Moving on to ordinance 1252.
I'd like to go ahead and move ordinance 1252, adopting the National Association of City Transportation Officials 2020 city limits, setting safe speed limits on urban streets.
Second.
I make the same comment.
Yeah.
Ditto
fair
on
enough.
that as well. Let's make sure our communication is good and that, as Councilmember Cassover suggested, that we actually post a link to the document,
You bet.
but emphasize that there are no preordained results or decisions being made of substance.
Thank you. Okay, ordinance 1252 has been moved in second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Ordinance passes unanimously. Thank you, council.
Thank you, council.
Okay, with that, we're gonna move on to ordinance and resolution for action, resolution 1859. This is the real 1859, authorizing the staff to, no, 58 was the first one up here. This one's been changed to 59. See,
Typo.
okay. Authorizing the staff to contact for a cloud storage service with Axon Enterprise Incorporated. Thank you, Chief. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor, for correcting that as well. And thank you for the earlier proclamation and Councilmember Cassover for the breast cancer awareness. I'm not wearing my pink patches. I do have my pink badge, but it is Pink Patch Month and you'll see all our officers out there. So good evening, Council and Mayor. Tonight I have Resolution 1859, continuing the contract for cloud services with Axon. This would be a 5-year contract and it's a continuation from the last 2 years. Axon is a company that we use for our tasers and our body worn cameras. Both devices upload data to evidence.com, which is the cloud service. So we've used evidence.com for our digital evidence for the past several years with our tasers, and then the last 2 years for our body worn cameras. Well, we are well within our storage requirements and everything has been working out very well. The cost of these cloud services are similar to the last contract with an actual decrease in cost because we're going to a 5-year contract. So I'm also asking council to waive the 3 touches as we do have the contract expiring tomorrow. So I don't want to put too much pressure on there. I will say that Axon does not mind if we do go over the expiration, if there was any need to continue. But I just wanted to let council know that.
Point of clarification then, Chief, that means we have to pass this
Correct.
before midnight.
Yes.
It's almost midnight on the East Coast, Tom. We better hurry up.
So if there's
Okay.
any questions, I'm here to field them.
Well, I think one of the questions is be, how come this is coming too late? I'm just going to answer the council questions for them, okay? How come this is coming to us and we have to make this decision so fast, Chief?
It's just not knowing when that contract was coming up, and then Axon takes a little bit of work to get the contract to come in. They are a very, very busy company. And they're doing a lot of work and it's just working through the different contracts. And sometimes when we get the contracts, I don't like particular language with something, or I try to negotiate the prices and it goes back and forth. And finally, the other thing is there's a lot of stuff on the agenda and things that are get busy. So that's where we landed with this one.
Okay, council, sorry for taking on a question. Any other questions from the council at this time?
No, I would, if the rest of the council is willing, I'd move to suspend our 3-touch rule for this ordinance
And I'll
or
second.
resolution.
It's been moved second. I think Councilmember Lebo raised your hand.
Do we just need to amend the resolution so that it reflects 1859?
Yes, that makes
Yeah.
sense. Okay.
And sorry.
No, that's fine. We're all
Yes,
for it.
yes, yeah.
Okay. So we've been moved in second. Any other discussion? Okay,
This is the 3-touch rule.
yeah, so
Yes.
do the 3-touch
Three-
rule.
This is suspending the 3-touch rule.
Okay, all those in favor of suspending the 3-touch rule, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Okay, and would anybody like to move resolution 1859?
Now I would move the adoption of resolution 1859, authorizing the staff to contract for cloud storage services with Axon Enterprises Inc.
Second.
Okay, it's moved in second. Any other discussion?
Just a point of order. Do we need to make a motion to amend the resolution and then move to pass the?
Kim, do we,
Is that a Scrivener's error or?
We could call it a Scrivener's error
That's
and
what I
the
was
clerk
saying,
can
yeah.
correct it.
Okay.
And he should have to.
Yeah. Yeah, because my resolutions are all X's. I don't know what they are.
Yes.
I'd like to speak to the motion if I
Yes,
could. And really, it's just to acknowledge that our police department has been very forward-thinking in the use of technology and in documenting and using video and just really doing a very professional job of utilizing modern technology. And I just want to congratulate you on that and tell you that I vote for this with enthusiasm.
Thank you. There is one thing I'll add just for Councilmember Riddle. She asked the question when we first started doing body worn cameras with storage, how this was going to look. And I didn't have an answer because we don't have the crystal ball and we are well within our storage. In about 5 years, we're going to have to come back and look at where we are with storage, but we have a pretty good maintenance schedule where things drop off. So we're watching that, but we're less than half right now and it's been 2 years. So we'll see how that goes in a few.
Okay, any other votes? Okay. All those in favor as amended, resolution 1859, please say aye.
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 Nays. Okay, passes unanimously.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, chief. And stick around, okay? No, not there, over there. All righty, here we go on to ordinance 1249, amending chapter 13.08 of the Lake Forest Park Municipal Code, sewer service and use regarding the rates. Welcome, Lindsay.
It's just too
so
much
much fun, isn't
fun.
it?
Yes, you have to. So thank you, council, and I will keep this one very brief. We are just asking on this ordinance to amend the current code in order to keep it more transparent prior to our budget process. In order to adopt the sewer fees by resolution. Currently, it states that we're allowed to just adopt them through the city's biennial budget. That's not the past practice that we've used. And so we just want to amend the code to state that we will adopt them separately by resolution in order to be more transparent with each individual item and rate that is being adopted as a portion and part of our city's budget. And that pretty much concludes a very brief overview. This is the third touch and we are hoping for a decision this evening. And that concludes my overview.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any questions?
Okay, seeing none.
Mr. Mayor, I'd be pleased to move. I'm always for greater transparency, so I'm very happy to move. I just can't get this computer to move. So ordinance 1249, amending chapter 1308 of the Municipal Code regarding rates for sewer service.
Second.
Is that a second?
I have a point of order.
Okay,
In the ordinance, in the last bit where it's approved by a majority, it says this XXX day of XXX 2022. Do we need to amend that or would that also be a Scrivener's?
Clerk would just fill that in.
okay, I heard like a screech. Was that a second?
Yeah, it was Councilmember Riddle seconded.
Okay, thank you. It's been moved in the second. Any other discussion? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor of ordinance 1249, amending chapter 13.8 of the Lake Forest Park Municipal Code sewer service and use regarding the rates, please say aye.
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 Any nays? Pass unanimously. Thank you, council. Thank you, Lindsay. With that, I guess we move on to council discussion or action. Okay, how about council committee reports? Yes, Councilmember French.
I don't need to update anybody on the budget meetings just because you've all been there. So just reminder to take a look at your calendars and ensure that you have the latest, greatest. It's also the full budget calendar is on the website. It's also in your budget book. So we're getting down to the home stretch here, folks. And Yes, next week, I guess it is, yes, the 20th, there will be a council budget and finance committee meeting. And yes, and then a committee of the whole meeting the following Monday. That's all I have.
Yes, Councilmember Farutami.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to commend Corey Roche and the Climate Action Committee for debuting their climate action survey at the farmers market this Sunday. Come visit the tent. Thank you.
Thank
Great.
you. Any other council committee reports? Yes, Councilmember Goldman.
I'll try to be brief. I attended two meetings this past week. The first was the tree board meeting. And in light of some recent staffing changes, the tree board is interested in looking at the tree code to kind of get a feel from the public what parts of the tree code seem to perturb them. And then looking, are there ways that we can maintain the quality, what we're intending, but to maybe soften it a little so it doesn't quite get people so riled up to the point where they would behave aggressively with staff members.
Thank you.
And they also reiterated that since the inventory will likely go into 2023, they're still very interested in looking at the data and then reporting back to us with recommendations regarding tree diameters for landmark trees.
Thank you.
The second one, I attended Seashore. Mainly it was an update on I-5 that they're doing some planning studies, one regarding seismic safety between down Boeing Field and Lake City Way, and the other looking at HOV lanes across like the whole Tacoma to Everett region and how they can make the HOV lanes more effective. And they did say if jurisdictions want to be part of the kind of the planning, that they can reach out. And so I believe, well, Director Perigo and Administrator Hill were both at the meeting. If that was something that we were interested in.
Thank you. Yes, Councilmember French.
Yeah, the way this is written, so I did my committee report. Now I need to do a quick update on the SCA PIC. Councilmember Bodie and I attended the PIC virtually last night. There was no action taken on anything. There was a couple of things that came up that I would highlight. One, Councilmember Bodie already mentioned this, that the question of climate action, climate change and comprehensive planning, and there was a robust discussion surrounding, question of whether how things are going to get funded, and it's difficult for smaller cities to achieve the successes that some of the medium, large, and large cities are potentially can get move forward. Discussion of SCA priorities, which align very directly with our own in terms of the regional issues. The question came up about a discussion about the levy that the county executive is proposing for behavioral health crisis care center. As many of you know, it's a very, very large ask of the region. Bill, what it 1.35 billion. It is massive. I would offer a little bit of comfort in that our friend Mr. Constantine tends to throw out a very large number against the wall to see what sticks, and very often regional bodies, the cities and folks cry foul and say this is very, very, it's just too large for us to shoulder. So we'll see where that goes. They're proposing having that on the April ballot. Our friend Kelly Curtis, who's a council member from Kirkland, gave everyone a brief overview of somewhat stridently, I would say, a little bit. I think as I don't know about Councilmember Bodie, but I think it's a little bit. Del Constantine's proposal is he's a little bit late to the party, I think, and I think he's being a little reactive on this. But at the same time, certainly everybody applauds what he is proposing. It's just kind of where was he when our coalition was putting things together because out of a definite need. So Councilmember Curtis kind of strongly reminded the group of what's going on in the North End and the successes that we're having. And I thought she did an outstanding job in that regard. The other thing is Levitt ballot measures coming up. There's going to be a series of them. Shorelines, of course, Prop 1 is coming up this fall, as well as next year, there'll be a renewal of the veterans, human services levy for the county, and as well as potentially Executive Constantine's proposal for this behavioral health initiative, which again is so much needed. It's just a question of making sure that that the resources are going to the right place and it's accomplishing their definitive key performance indicators that are being met and are being monitored and goals are being met. There's something else. Regional. Did you have another thought?
Well, I just wanted to say that I didn't think that the city of Kirkland's comments were too aggressive, because I do think that the concern is that the council will, it's a big ask. It might not succeed in the current economy. And so we need to, think about that. And also, I think, how will the governance structure work and what input will the cities have was an issue. There was no real answer except maybe we'll use existing coordination processes, which on the levies has not been so wonderful. So the other thing I would mention, so I've just put a little more negative spin on it. And then the other thing is they mentioned trying to formulate the legislative agenda, which aligns a lot with the Association of Washington Cities. But there was just that caution that there's a lot of momentum around those legislative proposals that just increase density in the name of climate change and affordable housing, but with no teeth for those things. So, there was just a sense that the cities could still be facing a bit of an uphill battle on trying to get some either sideboards or not so much loss of local control. So just it was delicately put, I thought, but
Indeed.
yeah.
Thank you.
That's it. Anybody else? Yes, Councilmember Cassover.
Yes, I did attend one meeting since I returned from Europe, and that was the Growth Management Policy Board, PSRC's Growth Management Policy Board. It was mostly a presentation event with housing strategy being discussed and the monitoring of housing strategies across cities and review of all of the city's various ordinances. And there were some case studies that were somewhat interesting. There is an effort to increase Black home ownership with a variety of agencies working together to identify the barriers and work to overcome them. And there was also a presentation about the South King County Housing Coalition where 11 cities have combined to fund affordable housing, which is very similar to the one up here in the northeast part of the county. But there was also an interesting presentation on the fact that Sound Transit is working with local communities to build affordable housing along transit corridors. I have to admit, it made me think a little bit about the lost opportunities that we've had really here in Lake Forest Park around the town center to get some units built. But and I wondered if even in the future yet there might be some ability to work with Sound Transit to get some units here. But during a lot of this too, there were discussions about the changes to the comp plan and the fact that there's really going to be more work required of cities to fulfill their responsibilities to complete their comp plans this next go round. And I made the point that as particularly mid and size and smaller cities, we are experiencing real difficulties in keeping up with the work and in making sure that we are fully staffed and in hiring staff, and that there needs to be some understanding and appreciation of that, not just by the state legislature, but also by PSRC. because I think there's more they could do to help us. And I can't say that I was received with great enthusiasm by the PSRC staff, but I certainly was by some of the other cities that were there. They agreed with me and were quite appreciative of what I had to say. So I will keep
Councilmember
carrying that message.
Castlever, on that last point, I remember that came up at SCA PIC at one point. And the concern was that they were moving towards imposing requirements that you would actually implement and track implementation of affordable housing, and that, you know, it presumed that you have the resources to actually implement some quota of affordable housing. And so that I think was a concern to all the small to medium cities,
Yes.
which is where is that, it's one step beyond the climate action plan, because you're talking about building structures. So now we have good partnership with King County Housing Authority. We have one of their projects in our city, and I would welcome those opportunities from King County Housing Authority. But I'm interested that you were not that well received.
I think mostly because the PSRC were thinking, oh, she's wanting us to do more work.
Oh, okay.
So,
Thank you.
but anyway, I just will keep stressing that point, because again, as I talked about in the budget meeting, I just think there's a lack of understanding on the part of some of our colleagues in those agencies that are bigger and higher up the food chain than we are in what it is we actually face. So it's a message we have to keep carrying.
Councilmember Riddle's been having her hand up for a long time. Then Councilmember Furatami. Go ahead, Councilmember.
Yeah, so 2-1, recently the Joint Recommendation Committee approved the projects for this year. And one of the things that I did note, just sort of in the back of my mind as I was looking through the projects, is that the very north end of King County has not taken advantage of the opportunities there to develop affordable housing up here. So Councilmember Cassover, it's sort of your comment made me remember that. So, you know, the shoreline at LFP, Kenmore, Bothell, we just, over the years, just haven't had projects up here. So I think it's a question of why. Why are we not an area where developers want to develop affordable housing? Because there's money to support that. The other meeting I attended today was the North King County Coalition on Homelessness. We got an update from the Oaks, and they are once again full. And have a wait list. So just keep that in mind. There is a need up here for those folks who need more a more stable shelter than just simply emergency shelter. So that's ongoing, as well as an update from the King County Regional Homelessness Authority that we are moving forward with an ILA language, and then they have a target to be able to have that presented to the cities in November-ish, and then hopefully signed and approved and ready and implemented by the first of the year. So that's their goal. So we'll be seeing more from them next month.
Thank you. Councilmember Furatami.
Hey, thanks, Mr. Mayor. And I was able to present at the K4C elected officials work session today. And I just wanted to commend Director Perigo on amazing graphics that made me look really good. So appreciate it very much. To the point that other council members were making, that 1% levy lid may basically be tested again, because with all these mandates, especially climate-based mandates that the state is putting down, a lot of cities are asking, how are we going to pay for this stuff? And you know, like us, there are many cities in the situation where they rely on property tax, and so that levy lid is being looked at again. Davina Dur, our first legislative district rep, was at this meeting, and she heard that message pretty loud and clear.
Thank you.
Councilmember Furatani did an awesome job.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, couple things. I'm gonna kind of go off a little bit, just so you know, so sit down for a while. Number one is coffee with the mayor on the 29th. I'm gonna advertise it a lot, and I think with all the stuff going on, we might have a good attendance for that, so we'll see. It's in the winter. This morning or this afternoon, when I got home from work, I got to witness 3 of our officers. We're having a problem with a gentleman down there in my street who's having quite a mental crisis, and they worked with him quite a long time, and he eventually got taken by medical on a stretcher, and he was pretty strapped down. That brings me to my point. This is where I'm at as mayor. I'm pretty worried because, during the last few years, there was a real push in this world to demonize police officers and defund your police department and all that stuff. I watched TV today where I saw 4 officers have been killed in the line of duty in the probably last 24 hours. I was very proud of our city because our council did a great job. I think I did a good job, and the citizens did a good job of making our police feel wanted, and we're a fantastic police department. Problem is now, all the idiots that got rid of their police want our police. And I hate to say that brutally, but that's what's going on. And I need you, I need my council, I need the citizens, I need myself, everybody to, whenever you're around an officer, please tell them how much you appreciate them. Because unfortunately, we can't be the highest priced place to work. I mean, to pay, but we'll do our best. But there's something else about being appreciated. And that's something big that we need to do. It's kind of a problem right now, and it's kind of sad. We spend a lot of money training, and I hate to say this every time, we might hire some new people, but unless they're lateral and they've been through all the training we've been through, that's tough. And right now, we're seeing a lot more of the problems in Lake Forest Park than we have in a long time. And I know everybody says, why'd you move to Lake Forest Park with their trees? Yeah, whatever. They came because they wanted to be safe. That's why you live here. That's why you raised your kids here. So that's my biggest concern. I'm sorry, I got a little cranky when you're talking about speed limits and stuff, but I'm more concerned about the other things coming into my city, and the heroin and the drugs, and it's there. I see that a lot more. I almost see more drugs than I see. Well, I will give it credit to this. My son drove 5,600 miles in a Porsche, has 7 of them, drives all over. They're louder than heck. And the only place he got a ticket was Lake Forest Park. So I'm pretty proud of that. So way to go, chief. And he deserved it. But really, folks, on the serious note, please appreciate our guys, because they really, we need to keep them. We need more of them. But until then, just remember, that's what makes Lake Forest Park a great place to live. The council members are doing great, and we get through the budget. Calvin, thank you very much. You didn't really have to sit here the whole night, but I'm glad you did. Because staff, you all did a great job.
Entertainment, isn't it?
And we will get there, but just again, take care of yourselves, be safe out there, and appreciate all the stuff the new people are bringing and some of the ideas that we all have had. So have a great week, and we'll get out of here. With that, I'm nothing else. Adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Mr.
Mayor.
Mayor.
Oh, no, it's okay. So